Hey everybody, welcome to Cast and Court TV. It's your girl, Miss Public Info, here with the latest and greatest and sometimes hated updates of the most high-profile cases going on around the country. Thanks so much for joining me, everybody. A happy, almost thankful day for those of you who do not celebrate Thanksgiving in the American traditional sense, such as myself. It's just a day of thanks to spend time with my family. I hope you guys have a wonderful day on Thursday, but wanted to come to you with some important updates, legal updates that are in the can here as it relates to some of the cases that we've been talking about over the past few weeks. So today we're going to talk about Sean Combs and his jail experience. We've got more information on what he might be experiencing on a day-to-day basis. And then we have an update on the case involving the singer David and some of the more gorier details. We're getting more information from the LAPD now, and I'll talk more about why that is. And then we're going to talk about Pras from the Fugees and his sentence, his federal sentence that he was given, I think, last week sometime. So let's get into that, and then we will go from there. Also, wanted to remind everybody, don't forget to subscribe and like. Don't forget to engage in the comments. Appreciate you guys. Thank you to my new subscribers out there. Thank you to those of you who have been holding me down for the past 7 months. We are a new channel, so we've only been around for around 7 months. Really appreciate all of the support that everyone has given, and just appreciate all of you for that. So let's talk about Sean Combs, and let's get into this. Now, the Sean Combs of it all is very interesting, and I talked to you guys about some of this probably a month or so ago when we saw some of the newer photos coming out of the jail of Sean Combs. Obviously, here in this photo, he is grayer. You know, we're not used to seeing him like that. I talked about that before. He's wearing the prison, sort of uniform, and other photos, which I'll show. He has other items of clothing on, which is also part of the prison uniform. But today we're just talking about getting a little bit of a more of a glimpse of what Sean Combs sort of does on a day-to-day basis. This is him walking down the hallway. He has a checklist in his hand or something of that nature. I think they talking about he gives items, religious materials, also movies out to the inmates. So it's possible he could have like a checklist in his hand, a check-in list, those who have checked out videos, materials, and things of that nature. Remember, I told you guys he's working for the jail cleric, and working for the jail cleric comes with its own sort of allowances and its own sort of, first class treatment, if you will. You're able to, work closely with staff. You get with the cleric staff, that is, you get special allegiances on. Sometimes you can get more food, better food than other people because they will bring food in. Other times, you have first dibs, obviously, at some of the materials that are being checked out. There's a little bit of power there because you are sort of in charge of checking these materials in and out, things of that nature. But, mostly what I think is interesting about all of this, and I sort of talked about this in the last episode where I talked about Sean Combs and his jail experience at Fort Dix in New Jersey, is that, how are we getting these photos? Well, we're getting the photos because, as I stated before, there are inmates who are looking to turn a buck. There's always going to be somebody who is going to be, looking to turn a buck for video, for photos, things of that nature. Now, in this particular case, there was video, and the inmate took the video and photos that you're seeing, one of the photos that you're seeing here, and sent it over to TMZ. Now, previously, we saw the photos of Sean Combs outside, with folks, congregating. Sebastian Telfair, former NBA player, he as well, with Sean Combs talking and things of that nature. Now we're getting a little bit more close. How does that happen? Well, it happens because you have people who are in close contact with Sean Combs on a day-to-day basis, and they're able to possibly smuggle in a phone. You're not supposed to have a phone or things of that nature, but we know that people do have those things. So they're able to smuggle in a phone. And it may not be someone there who's around Sean Combs on a day-to-day basis, but may have been around him that particular day and sees the opportunity to actually get this particular shot. Remember, this could also be a member of staff, someone that is employed there at Fort Dix, who's also taking these photos. and sending them in to TMZ. They're turning a pretty penny for this. I would venture to say, and I'm guessing, and I have no way of knowing how much TMZ is paying for these photos and video, but it's probably in the upper thousands. I would bet. And so that's why people are, you know, risking their freedom even within inside of this prison, and then risking their job if they're actually federal uh employees to take this material, take this photo, and take these videos. Now we're going to take a look at another photo that is Sean Combs actually. See, let me take this one down. That he's actually right here within the cleric's office. There, he's actually with an inmate. You see, he has on a phone, a coat and a beanie, so he's obviously been outside. It's November in New Jersey, so it's probably pretty frigidly cold. He has a library behind him, so he's also the other thing that he does when he's in this office is that he cleans up. So there are other photos where he's sweeping up and things of that nature. So behind him are sort of like the archives of the cleric's office, where those religious materials or books or movies or whatever it might be are there, and inmates can come in there and check those items out. Mr. Combs, I think in this particular instance, is actually getting ready to get himself settled. I saw the video, and it basically shows these two, Mr. Combs and this guy here, sort of just exchanging whatever apparatus that they need to do the job. So he could be relieving this gentleman, and then he's now taking over to do his job here. And then there's other photos that show other inmates as well, sort of being in that room. But what Mr. Combs is doing more than anything is that he is cleaning. So listen, guys, this isn't like a huge update as to, oh, this is, Sean Combs is getting out or anything like that, even though his son, King Combs, did do an interview. I think it was a TMZ, not an interview sit down per se, but they caught him, I think, at the airport. And he said, like anybody would, like, we're hoping to get my dad back home quickly, is essentially what he said. Obviously, he's going to have to continue his therapy, and he's going to have to continue his time and doing all of that. But I think that, what else do you say? If you're being cornered by TMZ and you're the kid of Sean Combs, you obviously, continue to be positive about this particular thing. And you say, hey, we're hoping to get him back home as soon as possible. But what I think is really interesting about this is all the great lengths that people are taking to get inside footage of Sean Combs. And he had to know that this was going to be a thing. His folks, probably his lawyers probably also knew that this was going to be a thing. Back in the 80s and 90s, this wouldn't have been a thing, because how many, high profile mafioso or high profile drug dealers have we seen go into Fed prison, and we've not seen or heard from them again? But probably part of that is technology. Technology has changed, but also the fact that people are smuggling in phones and things of that nature. And obviously, this is a low security prison, so therefore, it's easier for people to get these sorts of items inside of the prison, and they're willing to risk their freedom within the prison to, get this photo or this video of Sean Combs sort of just doing his day to day. I also think, as it relates to safety, this is a little helpful for Sean Combs, because then now other people who may have been potential threats to him, though it may be low security, it still is a thing. They know that there are people watching, and that, every week there's a new video, a new photo of Sean Combs on TMZ or Page Six or whoever it is. So those people who may have been threats, potential threats to Sean Combs, will likely sort of probably dissipate and stand down, because there's sort of like this fence of, shield here where people are watching. And if this guy ends up, hurt or anything like that, people are gonna know. You can't be covert with this kind of guy. Now, Joe Giudice, who spent about 40 months in Fort Dix for his offenses, including tax evasion, financial crimes. I'm talking about Joe Giudice from the Housewives of New Jersey, whose wife, Teresa Giudice, also did a stint in federal prison for similar crimes. He said the following. He said that if Sean Combs just keeps his head down, he doesn't try to be a big shot, then he will be okay in the prisons. Now, I don't know if you would equate, folks taking photos of him on their own volition and sending them to a TMZ as him being a big shot. I don't think so. I just think this is a situation where people are sort of, being resourceful. You're in a place where people are extremely resourceful to try and parallel their lives on the inside to some semblance of normality of their lives on the outside, right? So these are folks who are very crafty. And so they are doing what they have to do to make money, not only for themselves on the inside, but also to send to family on the outside to take care of their family. People have responsibilities. Those things still go on. And this is kind of a once of a lifetime opportunity for these guys because how often do you get locked up with a high profile guy like Sean Combs? So we're going to keep our, eyes on the Sean Combs matter. Also in the press today is the fact that 50 Cent's documentary with Netflix partner uh, about Sean Combs, his fall, is actually coming out around Thanksgiving. So this is something that we will be seeing here shortly. 50 Cent, we know that is a nemesis of Sean Combs, not only just because he is a nemesis of a lot of people, but because Jane Doe 2 already identified, we all know in public circles, especially those of us in the culture, is Daphne Joy. Daphne Joy is 50 Cent's child's mother. She is the mother of 50 Cent's, I think, 10 to 11-year-old kid. Um, and so he has a problem with Sean Combs. Obviously, he had an issue, 50 Cent had issues with Sean Combs prior to, sort of any of this becoming a thing, going to federal court and things of that nature. So this whole thing, of course, during the trial, you guys probably recall 50 Cent being very sort of, himself, being very antagonistic, I will say, about all of this while Sean Combs was on trial and Daphne Joy was on the stand, making little, remarks about Daphne Joy being a sex worker, talking about things of that nature, even talking about, trying to get custody of the son, because of some of these things that we were hearing. So all of this is very interesting and very interestingly timed. And I think that 50 Cent, of course, he is a well-known and highly celebrated producer, producing much of executive producing the Power Universe and starring in the Power Universe as well. And so he and the Black Mafia family as well. So he is definitely, somebody who isn't just, this is the first time he's picking up a camera or a pen and putting, script into motion. 50 Cent knows what he's doing. And when you pair that with an extreme dislike for someone that he has for Sean Combs, then we're talking about something that is, you know, high octane in nature. So I will be sitting and watching that documentary because I am sure it is going to be very, very interesting. Okay, guys, let's move on to our next topic. Let's talk about the singer David. Now, David, of course, I talked about him last week because I talked about the fact that David is now an official suspect in this case that where, excuse me, Miss Celeste Rivas Hernandez, who was 14, 15 at the time, was found in the trunk of a Tesla that was registered to David, who was on a world tour at the time. Now there are more gruesome details being revealed after, the LAPD has let everyone know that he is now a suspect. Now, uh, we're now finding out that Miss Rivas Hernandez's body had been frozen. And so they, because of the state of her body, they were not able to really tell what exactly happened to her body, the manner of death and things of that nature. So there is the one of the reasons, and people could be wondering why this hasn't happened is, and why I was careful in the last episode to talk about it, that why hasn't the LAPD deemed this a homicide? Why haven't they said that this was a murder? It obviously was. Now, to you or I, we're watching, seeing this all unfold, especially those of us who have been in law enforcement. We know that this was a murder. We're very clear on it. But in order for the coroner, who basically creates the case for it being a murder based upon the manner of death of the body at the time in which it was found or whatnot. The coroner has to determine that the manner of death was homicide in order for a murder case to continue to take place. Now, in this particular case, I think that they have the status or the manner of death at this time is undetermined. So doesn't mean it's not a murder case. It just, or that the manner of death wasn't murder. It's just that the coroner's office for right now have not been able to determine that. And so that's part of the reason why they've not been able to charge David. So it's kind of twofold. So the on the one hand, the coroner has not determined that the manner of death was murder, right? On the flip side of that, David has also stopped cooperating with authorities. And so this is the reason now the LAPD has come out and said, well, you're a suspect, and we're going to let everyone know. And now they've taken a step further from last week when they announced that he was a suspect. And now they're giving up more details. And they're doing that, as I mentioned to you all last week, because they're trying to draw David out. He stopped cooperating. He stopped talking to the police. As you recall, at the beginning of this case, when he was off in, somewhere in the world performing and on in the middle of this tour, he was cooperating with police. He stopped the tour, came back to Los Angeles a little bit earlier than the tour had allowed. He was talking with police and all of that. But as the case started to unfold, he stopped talking to police. Now, I talked about last week about how, this is not necessarily abnormal for someone to do. Someone who has been questioned by the police, but the police has nothing to go on. So they may stop cooperating. That's happened, and the case will often run cold. But the difference in this case and other cases that are out there in the world where this has happened is that David is a public figure. And because the LAPD knows that, they're going to utilize tactics, strategy to try and make this as public as possible so that David is publicly uncomfortable. And also, as a natural byproduct, and perhaps the biggest point of this, is it will sort of mess with the way that David makes money. He's a singer, he's a songwriter, he's these things. But you can't type in D4VD without this murder case coming up. And without, I'm calling it a murder case, guys, without this murder case coming up and without seeing the articles say that this guy is a suspect, that this was a 15-year-old girl, this is a 20-something-year-old guy, that they have been seeing each other since this girl was 13. Like all of these things, this kind of messes with him, his his uh his reputation as a singer, as an entertainer, etc. And so this could mess with his money. And this, in turn, may draw him out to the LAPD. And that is what the LAPD is betting on. So they are releasing more information. Now, per TMZ, the medical examiner, and the report apparently is now public. The medical examiner reportedly received the body in horrendous condition. Now, I want everybody to remember that the time in which this body was found, that it was around, it was August. Like the body was in that trunk for a while. So, and not to mention that in September 8th, when the body was found, it was still really warm here in Los Angeles. Okay. They said that Miss Celeste Hernandez was reportedly decapitated. She was decapitated, they said. They said that her limbs were removed. Now, this isn't the first time we heard about this. For some of you, it may be, but her limbs were removed and she was cut into pieces, apparently. So, what I recall of this case is that the torso was kind of like the part of the body that was sort of intact. that you could, that they could actually have and see and, do what they need to do to see potentially the manner of death. No head, so we're looking at a headless body, but like a neck, particularly. They didn't find any sort of, obvious ligature marks, come from physical asphyxiation, someone sort of strangling someone. They didn't see that. That wasn't obvious, which is the reason they weren't able to say that she was shot, she was stabbed, but what they did know is that her body had been mutilated essentially and cut up into pieces. They said that the body parts were also partially frozen and that it seemed that the body had been thawing a while in the trunk. So, as I mentioned, because of the fact that it had been hot, it had been thawing out. Now, one thing we need to remember is that David had been on a world tour, but he hadn't been on a world tour that long. So it's possible that he knew exactly what was going on with the situation, and that this all occurred timing wise uh, during the time in which he left for this world tour, or it involves more than just him. And so he had help to sort of, freeze this body or get this frozen body out of, that home that the police did the raid on and into that trunk. Um, and the home that the police did the raid on was also connected to David, and they went and did the search procedure with that. They got enough evidence to get a judge to sign off on that. And then the car, it was found in front of this house, in front of the area where this neighborhood was, where David was, staying at that time. And so they said that the body was in such bad condition when they found, this is what the medical examiner's office is saying, that when they got the body, it was in such bad condition that they didn't even know what sex the body was, whether it was a woman, whether it was a male. And I remember this being very true and a topic of interest during the time, because at the time it just said there was a body found in a car and they didn't know much about it. And then it wasn't until the LAPD's robbery and homicide division got involved that they started really sort of looking into this situation. And in the medical examiner's report, they say due to the body's state, the state in which the body was in, that this will cause most likely, the cause rather, will most likely be ruled undetermined. And so the homicide and robbery division of the LAPD, they got involved despite all of that, because you actually don't need, I've been involved in homicide cases as a public information officer for the district attorney's office. I've been involved in homicide cases where we actually convicted someone without a body. So it's very possible that a conviction is possible based on uh, other points of evidence. And in the case that I was involved in, it really relied on things like cell phone data, computer data, text messages, piecing that together and putting this person in the same mainframe of time frame with this individual who is the decedent. So it's possible that a murder case can still go to trial. You can still charge someone with the murder without a body. Absolutely can happen. It's just harder to do. And so in these preliminary stages where we're talking about the death being undetermined, it doesn't work great for the homicide division of LAPD that from the medical examiner's office, the death is undetermined. It just means that it means that the homicide division has to work that much harder to get enough evidence to the DA to charge David with murder. What this tells me is that they know it was murder, they know it was homicide, they know that David is the guy. They know he's the guy, but they have to get enough because they don't have the determination of it being a murder or a homicide, rather, interchangeable, same thing, from the coroner's office. Then they've got to piece together more information than they normally would if they had the manner of death being homicide. uh Now they have to do more work, and that is the reason David is, not cooperating. It's the reason they've come out and said he's the suspect and they're trying to draw him out, because they need more information to make it what it needs to be. Now, they could get this information without David, but the case may run cold and could become a cold case in the meantime until they actually get the information that they need, until people decide that they want to talk, until, people with the information on the nature of their relationship decide they want to talk and things of that nature. So, um, yeah, the LAPD has decided that they are going to move forward with an arrest if they can. That's what TMZ is reporting. This says the following: even if the official cause of death is undetermined, authorities can move forward with an arrest. And that's basically what I explained to you all, how that happens or how that can be. They said that, this Tesla was parked for several days on a street near the home, as I explained to you, um, and that it was eventually towed to this tow yard. And that's when, all things started happening and the ball started rolling and the body began to stink. And then that's when they discovered all of that. Now they're saying that it is also, so this is new information for us, that David is also, not only is he a suspect, but he's not the only suspect. And this is what I was talking about a little bit ago when I said he's probably had help, because you're talking about cutting someone up, unaliving someone, cutting someone up, freezing them, and then eventually carrying their body out to, or parts of their body out to the car. Also, where are the other body parts? Where are the limbs? Where is the head? Where's all of that? So now there's the second suspect. And they're not really saying who that person is, but they're saying that there is a second suspect. TMZ is also reporting that the critical part of the case involves a trip investigators say that David took to a remote area of Santa Barbara County in the middle of the night back in the springtime, where he spent 2 hours. Now, that's very interesting because the coroner's office, I recall them saying that she likely died sometime in or around the time of her birthday, which was, I believe, the beginning of September. But I would say that that's not completely, true or possible, seeing that the body was frozen to the degree that it was, and then that it had been thawing in the car. I would say that it's more plausible that she was killed sometime, you know, during months before, possibly in the springtime that they're talking about here, and then the body was frozen for a time, maybe a month or two, three, maybe even. And then when it was time for him to go on this tour, he had to finally get rid of this final part of the body, which was the torso, and decided to put that part in that vehicle and then abandon the vehicle and go on about his tour or whatever he needed to do. Now we're hearing that in the spring, he took a trip in the middle of the night for 2 hours. And he, was in Santa Barbara County. Now, if those of you who are not familiar with Santa Barbara County, let me tell you about it. It is vast and big. It's part of what California calls their wine country. So there's a lot of open space. It's not exactly desert. It's not desert, but there's a lot of open space in Santa Barbara County. So it's possible that if you wanted to hide body parts, as part of the LAPD's running theory here, is that this trip was related to Miss Hernandez's passing, and that there may have been body parts that may have been frozen for a while before ending up in his Tesla. So there's some connection there. He could have been out there hiding body parts. Who knows? Yes, and then again, parts of her body rather was found in that Tesla one day after her 15th birthday. So though there's been no charges filed at the time, it's also because Mr. Burke, that's his government name, has not been cooperative in the investigation, according to sources. So, despite his rep saying, "Oh, well, he's been fully cooperating," he has not. And one thing I think we all need to just be honest about is that Ms. Hernandez's parents were completely completely negligent in this situation. I could tell you now, when I was a teenager, particularly 13 years old, they're saying she, was going missing at 13 years old. You're hearing from other people, teachers and people who used to educate her at the school or whatnot. She's going missing at 13. I don't know anyone who personally, and I'll just use myself, there was nowhere I could go at 13 years old that my mother didn't know where I was. It just was an impossibility. So the fact that she was running away from home and doing all of these things and, being off with this boyfriend that we've heard in, some of the news articles, and again, Cast and Court TV is only going to go on what has been presented by law enforcement, but also what's been reported by the press, the mainstream press, not TikTok, not, YouTube and all of that, but the mainstream press. And one of the things that has been talked about in the mainstream press regarding this particular situation is that Miss Hernandez was known to have an older boyfriend, that her mother knew that she had this 20-something-year-old boyfriend, and that there's photos of her out with him and everything. So her parents knew that. There was also an interview where I think People magazine did with a former teacher who said that at one point, she had run away from home and that the police picked her up at the school. So she had been known for running away from home. Now, a lot of this, is bearing on the parents. What are the parents doing in this situation with their teens? Why don't you know where your teens are? Listen, I'm not a parent, guys. I'm not trying to come down on anyone. I'm not trying to judge anyone. Everyone raises their kids the way that they want. So please don't come at me about that. But what I'm saying is the fact that when you have a young lady or a young man who is running away. First of all, you need to find out why they're running away from home, what's happening at home, that this is not a place they want to be, but also who are they running to? Because as with the situation with Miss Hernandez, the person that she's running to is the fox in the henhouse. We have somebody that's running away from one bad situation to another bad situation. So I think a lot of people failed Miss Hernandez, Rivas Hernandez in this situation. Obviously, she failed herself in a lot of instances as well, continuing to run from home and continuing to be around this person and not knowing. But she's a kid, essentially, at the bare minimum. And she's probably running away from a situation. I would say her parents are very much to blame and are very negligent in this situation, whether it's not providing a safe environment for her to begin with and not, chastening after her to find out where she was, you know what I mean? Who she was with, who she was being seen with, what was going on with that situation, and why she was in the company of an adult male. She was, I believe they said she was 13 or so when she began this relationship with David. David at the time would have made him around 19 or so, and her turning 15 in September. It's possible that, he was already 20 or 21 during this time that her body was found or whatnot. But regardless, in the state of California, you as an 18-year-old or older person cannot legally have a relationship with someone who is under the age of 18. That is an inappropriate relationship. And so this is where the parents come in. This is where there's a lot of negligence on Ms. Rivas's mother and father, those that were responsible for her care, where they really failed her in this instance. We're going to continue to stay on top of the David situation. We'll let you know, of course, as more information rolls in. We're definitely waiting for this arrest, which should be more imminent than not. But again, this could be a case that might turn cold because they don't have the information that they need. But it could also be a situation where I will say this. They already know that he spent 2 hours in the middle of the night, sometime 4 or 5 months ago in Santa Barbara County. They're going to go down to Santa Barbara County and they're going to be looking for body parts, essentially, because they're missing a head, they're missing other limbs. Okay. So that's the thing that they're going to be looking for. Also, the thing that they're going to be looking for as well is David was driving a Tesla. So one of the things about Teslas is that it keeps a record of, like, it's like a computer, so the computer in the Tesla, so it keeps a record where this person went. Teslas probably aren't great cars to be driving if you're going to go hide body parts in the middle of nowhere. It's just probably not, because they're recording, they keep record of where the car has gone. That's part of Tesla's, the thing that makes them smart, right? Well, in this particular case, this couldn't be more dumb for David, who is now going to get found out. Now, if they go through the Tesla information and then they go through, and that's probably how they know that he spent 2 hours out in the middle of Santa Barbara County a couple of months ago, and they go out there to that area and they excavate and they find body parts, you best believe that that is enough to arrest him for suspicion of murder in Los Angeles County. So we're going to see, or in the state of California, just in general. So we're going to see how this all ends up. But when I was at the district attorney's office, there was a case that we had where I'll never forget this case, but it was a kid by the name of Aaron Thompson. And to this day, Aaron Thompson's body has never been found. But we did convict her father of murder. And we did so based upon, like I said previously, other items, other evidentiary items that included like cell phone data, that includes computerized, information, text messaging, and things of that nature. So again, just because you don't have a body doesn't mean you don't have a murder case. Okay, guys, let's move on to the last story of the day. And we are going to talk about Pras, because Pras, I talked to you guys about him last week. I talked about how Pras was actually in trouble uh for some voter fraud, not voter fraud, I'm sorry, from election donation fraud is the issue here with Pras. Now, he was finally sentenced last Thursday to 14 years in prison for a case in which he was convicted of illegally funneling millions of dollars in foreign contributions to um, President Barack Obama's 2012 reelection campaign. I want to stop there because I want people to understand that this was unbeknownst to President Barack Obama. He has nothing to do with this case whatsoever. But really, this is a case that has to do with Praz sort of committing conspiracy and acting as an unregistered agent of a foreign government, and namely that was Malaysia. He was involved with a Malaysian con man who supposedly had ties to the government there, and he was utilizing Praz to actually get some relationships with other government officials here in the United States. But the problem with that is that Praz had no connection to Barack Obama. He had no connection to anyone. But he was allowing this guy to pay him millions to get, photos with Barack Obama, for an example. And a lot of this is espionage. It's considered to be a form of espionage. But instead of being charged with espionage, Praz was charged and convicted of 10 counts of conspiracy and acting as an unregistered agent of a foreign government. Now, the trial in DC also included testimony from Leonardo DiCaprio, yes, the actor Leonardo DiCaprio, and the former Attorney General Jeff Sessions. You might remember Jeff Sessions because during Trump's first run, he was the Attorney General. Jeff Sessions is known for being a bigot, a racist, coming out of the state of Alabama. He's known for that, but that's just a side note. He was also part of the testimony. They don't say who they were witnesses for, whether they were witnesses for Pras Michel or whether they were witnesses for the government. So I'm gonna guess that Jeff Sessions was a witness for the government and not Pras. Okay. Now Pras 52, he declined to address the court after the hearing, after his sentencing, rather. But the Justice Department said the following. They said that, the federal sentencing guidelines recommended a life sentence for Praz. They said that he betrayed his country for money, and that he lied, and that he was unapologetic and unrelenting to carry out the schemes that he carried out. They said that his sentence should have reflected the breadth and depth of his crimes, his indifference to the risks to the country, and the magnitude of his greed, they said. Now, his defense attorney said that the 14-year sentence that he did get as opposed to the life sentence, was completely disproportionate to the offense. That Michel will appeal his conviction, and that they will move on from there. Now, his attorney recommended a 3-year prison sentence. He stated that a life sentence would be an absurdly high punishment for Michel, given that it is typically reserved for deadly terrorists and drug cartel members. And so, that they obviously met way beyond the middle. And I think, given that he was looking at a life sentence, 14 years is no time, right? Um, the government went on to say that the government's position is, excuse me, I'm sorry, Michel's attorney went on to say that the government's position is one that will cause, um, other government officials to recoil, excuse me. And if anything, it illustrates how easily the guidelines can be manipulated to produce absurd results, and how poorly equipped the government is, at least on this occasion, Praz's attorney said. So, let's talk about what happened. Michel, essentially, he obtained over $120 million from Malaysian billionaire Low Tech Joe. That's the guy I'm talking to you about, that, gave him money to get him connections with other government officials here in the United States, and steered some of that money through straw donors to Obama's campaign. I think out of the 120 million, I think he steered maybe 600,000. That sounds familiar to me. 600, could have been 800,000 to Barack Obama's campaign, and that was just so that it seemed like he was doing what he said he would do. He also tried to end a Justice Department investigation of Lowe by tampering with two of the witnesses, and then he perjured himself at trial. This has actually been going on for quite a long time. This Lowe guy, you may be wondering, why was Leonardo DiCaprio being called? Well, this is why. Lowe has lived in China. He was one of the primary financiers of the hit film The Wolf of Wall Street, which of course starred Leonardo DiCaprio. So that is the reason why Leonardo DiCaprio was likely there. He obviously, based upon those facts, was a witness for the government. Lowe is also a fugitive, but has maintained his innocence throughout this time. The Michel's attorney said this about Lowe. They said Lowe's motivation for giving Mr. Michel money to donate was not so that he could achieve some policy objective. Instead, they said that Lowe simply wanted to obtain a photograph with himself and then President Barack Obama, which we know, even if that was the truth, guys, yeah, Pras was not in a position to even get that. He had no connection with Barack Obama, no political connections whatsoever, and had no authority to get that from him and to accept money on his behalf to get that. Now, in August of 2024, the judge rejected Michel's request for a new trial based in part on his efficiency of his defense attorneys, and the use of generative AI program during the closing of the trial's arguments, basically saying that he didn't agree with that. He didn't agree with using that. And the judges said that the other trial errors didn't amount to a serious miscarriage of justice, so that there would be no new trial. So that is really it for Pras. He's going to spend the next 14 years in federal lockup. Obviously, he'll do, the 85%, and then they'll talk about, what it looks like after that, whether or not he'll have to do the entire time. But he's gonna be away for a while. What is the song that Wyclef had? Gone to November. Well, this guy's gonna be gone for the next 14 years. Okay, guys, that is going to be it for me. That's it for Cast and Court TV. We appreciate you. We definitely hope that you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday, or thanks day of thanks holiday. Thanks so much for joining us today. We appreciate you. Stay safe out there. Be merry, be safe with your family, and we will see you next time. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you soon. Peace.